All right, hello and welcome to what is effectively the April episode of season 2 of Plays Well with Others. I've completely lost track of the episode numbers at this point because I did one episode that didn't fall into the regular schedule and everything fell off the rails after that. So, you're listening to this in April, so this is the April episode. I think that would make it episode 4.
Let's go with that.
So, today, we're going to carry on the topic of AI.
Yes.
This is going to be a big topic full of lots of subtopics or smaller sub-bullets.
We'll have some side quests as we go forward.
This is all the side quest. This is all a side quest. The main quest line was a different timeline. It's gone now. So I don't think we're going to actually be summarizing an article in this episode, but the article's kind of positing an idea. So last month we talked about the ethics of AI and what data collection for AI or for machine learning actually means. In this episode, we want to talk about a more tight connection with the business value of AI, because the hot button item for the last few months has been a term you may not have heard yet, but it's called vibe coding. And that's this concept that you have developers that are just vibing, not checking anything, not verifying anything, just rocking and rolling with the large language models, telling them what they want, and then they're copy pasting it. I think it does. And I'm not going to comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing yet. We'll get there. I promise you we have opinions. But the specific aspect of this one is less about, is AI code generation good or bad? It's how do you set a strategy for your business primarily? How do you set a strategy for your business that seeks to democratize development or democratize application building? And until 6 months ago, everyone's approach was what we call low-code platforms or BPA, business process automation. The whole idea being, instead of writing code, instead of knowing syntax, you take Lego bricks and you plug them together and you build a control structure. The only thing you need to know at that point is how to log into the app stack and how to generally reason through things in a logical way. So the topic or the discussion is, I think it's multiple choice, but it's probably 3 options instead of 2. As you want to dig into democratizing your development, I don't want the only person or the only people building applications to be developers. As you move forward with that, do you look primarily at low-code platforms, knowing they're tried and true? Do you look at no-code platforms, which until 6 months, a year ago-ish, was a different thing, but now more of what they're referring to is AI code generation? Or I'd say there's a third option of, is it a mix? Is it a blend of the two? And what we'll talk about, what we'll probably argue about, is what are the pros and cons of each of those approaches. Sound about right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And honestly, I'm of 2 minds on a little bit of this, right? Because you're still going to have that benefit of faster turn time. You're not getting in the way of the innovation of the business and the work that the business wants to deliver by having a full development team have to put it into a sprint and do testing and roll it out. But when you lose that process, you also lose an overarching strategy for what you're building, interconnectedness between what you're building. And you kind of end up with having unmanaged, unscalable tech debt that you then have to eventually resolve. So again, I'm kind of of 2 minds.
Well, I'm glad you took that first take so that I didn't have to do it, because I don't want to come across as a gatekeeper. I'm not saying that you have to be a developer to be successful at writing logic or using logic, but it really does help. It really does help to have gone through that exercise of building a structured logical flow for a process.
Yeah, it does. And here's the thing, I spent years and years working in product, and a lot of times you'll end up with these very passionate business stakeholders who have a vision of what they want to deliver. And when you work with them, you get very excited and you're delivering something that's that they've never been able to do before, something with their perspective in mind. I can think of a scenario at another company where Andrew and I worked previously. His team actually built out a tool for one of our divisions that just didn't get a lot of love, right? And they got to sit down, they got to write out exactly what they wanted, and we built it for them, and it was amazing. Here's the thing, though. A lot of what they asked for, what they wanted, we could do, but we couldn't do it necessarily in the safest way. So we had to go, that's great. We're going to do this and it's going to accomplish your business goal. It's going to take a little longer, but it's going to be safer. And I think that conversation, that safety conversation, is something that the whole natural language processing, am I saying it right?
Yep. NLP, baby.
The natural language processing, what model is it using behind the scenes? Where is it pulling, like, where's it pulling this information from? It's generative AI, right? It's generating something that's never been created before, but it's working off of some sort of information, some sort of data set in the background. So are you sure you're getting something that has up-to-date security measures in it? Is it possible that something could be introduced that creates a vulnerability in your environment? There's a lot of questions around that, and how do you protect yourself while still going fast?
Well, you just dove well deep into that one. I'm going to back up a little bit. So you mentioned NLP, or natural language processing. I want to define that real quick, just so that we're using the same terms. So natural language processing is something that's been around for decades. And it's the idea of converting words, language, into sentiment, or into intent. I believe it's actually called intentions, or the components that a decomposed NLP
Like the
algorithm spits
gobbledygook
out.
you put into Google and it actually tries to interpret what you want and
Exactly.
provide you something.
NLP is not generative AI.
No, it's
NLP is
not.
not a large language model, but
It's not, but
it's a piece. It's a piece.
it's your input into that machine learning model that then is going to generate something for
Yeah,
you.
it's what allows the LLM to actually understand what you're saying and then convert that into computer language input and then output eventually. Anyway, the next thing that you said was, what's the backing data of this? And I think that's a fantastic point, because when we talk about AI code generation, one of the major items right now, or hot button issues. I've said that word a lot. I need a better phrase, but one of the major concerns right now with AI code gen or vibe coding or whatever is the resulting security implications.
Mm-hmm.
And I read about a particular exploit that's, I don't know if it's actually been used in the wild. I haven't seen a 0-day for it, but I also haven't really looked hard. Is this idea that a lot of code generation models are based on rule sets that are open source. And those rule sets are what allow the model to generate code. And the attack vector is a malintent is going to write a malicious,
Something nefarious. Yeah.
a malicious code rule set and hide it behind like code rules dot whatever the file extension is, pull requested into the open source rule set, and then suddenly you have downstream users that are generating code based on that malicious rule set.
That's terrifying.
I
See,
know.
where I thought you were going is, oh, this is like writing an article from Wikipedia. You don't know what somebody's gone in and updated. But this is even worse than what I was thinking. It's not just like inaccurate, it is malicious. That's
Right.
terrifying.
So there's a few on this one, actually, and a few that there's one that I don't have a source from, but I got it from a reputable source that just can't find his source. So I read it on the internet. It must be true. But
Yeah, obviously.
as people go forward, I think the article that we're citing, and I guess we're going to have to cite the article now, is it said that Gartner is predicting that at least 70% of new applications in 2025 will be generated by low or no code, which means that there's a really big blast radius for any sort of malicious activity within the code generation ecosystem. So if you're considering it, you better have a dev. Just
Well,
frankly.
yeah. I mean, what you're saying, does this mean that low code, no code apps, or specifically these AI, generative AI, no code apps, are they the next big attack surface for?
100%.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, because it's how many
So
times,
a payload could be distributed in one of these open source locations right now that's going to come to bite someone in the butt in 12 months when they have
right?
just the right question that gets
Because
posed.
if you're just copy pasting your code, not reading it, or you don't have the skills to read it, you're not a developer that's seen it before, you don't know what you're releasing.
Yeah.
There's been a
I wouldn't
few
know.
different no.
I
There's been
would
a
I would write something. I'd be like, "Oh, it does what I want it to do. Let's go."
there's been a few different instances that I've seen recently, like in the last 3 months, where someone has used a code gen platform and they've managed to release their database access keys, which is no
Oh,
bueno, right?
that's
So you
terrifying.
imagine, all right, so I'm an online retailer and I've built my e-commerce site using CodeGen, and I managed to push my database access key to the client, to the individual browser, and somebody sees that. Now I have access to your database. I own your database, which means I can update stock.
It's
I
a
can,
ransomware attack right there.
well, yeah, or more subtly, I can change prices, I
Gosh.
can potentially redirect prices, I can exfiltrate card information, payment information, customer base, vendors, all manner of things. That's why we
Yeah.
never assume that just because you have your database access protected, that that's it. We always
Yeah.
assume that there's another layer. We need to encrypt that data. We need to protect that data from exfiltration, so it's encrypted at rest and in transit.
Hmm.
Even if it's already owned, still got some coverage. But that's just one of them. Exposing database credentials, that's a best case resume generating, worst case business ending.
Yeah. So how do you protect against it? We talked about the low code options, which might still use AI, but not generative AI. So it might be slightly more protected, right? Because you have those parameters that are built into what your low code is capable of doing. So there's been some development behind the scenes to develop the low code platform that might protect you, right?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't, to be clear, never trust a vendor, right? So you own your business. You're responsible, you're accountable. The way that I see it is it's rings of influence. So at the very center, you have somebody that's building the application. That person needs to be empowered with the knowledge and the skills to understand what the application is doing, what it should be doing, and what the code says. So just because you told the AI, just because you told the model that this is what I want, that doesn't mean that that's what it gave you.
Mhm.
I had a developer tell me recently, and I think it was said really well, the AI's goal is to agree with you. And if you interact with ChatGPT, with Claude, with Gemini, whatever,
That's not a good thing. That
but you
means you're
get the
talking into an
idea,
echo chamber.
right?
You're
But
not getting any pushback on your
that's
ideas.
the idea, is the AI is trying to agree with you. So if you tell it something and gives you a wrong answer, you say, no, that's not right. What's it say? Oh yeah, you're right. That's not right. And it continues to give you bad information, but
Mhm.
it's telling you, yeah, you're right. I agree. I agree. I agree. Still giving you bad info. So center ring, and that's really the first and last line of defense, is the person interacting with the model needs to
Yeah.
know for darn sure what they're doing. Taking it out of ring, you need to have some degree of supply chain protection. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But this is one that if you're in a regulated industry like finance, mortgage lending, or healthcare, that's likely already a requirement for you, that you have static code scanning, you have some degree of a CI/CD deployment pipeline, you
Mhm.
have a codified workflow to get from zero to production. In a lot of cases, like if you're using GitHub CodeQL, you can set that scan up to identify security holes. If you're using SonarQube, if you're using any of the SaaS platforms like White Hat, or blanking on some of the other names, but they're out there and there's even new ones now. But if you're not scanning your code as part of the supply chain, you're going to run a risk of missing one of those holes.
We have our
I know.
co-host participating in the conversation.
I know. This lady was
I
supposed to
like
be here 15 minutes ago and she just got here. Oh well.
I like the concept that you're talking about. Well, I might be making some leaps here, but what I'm thinking I'm hearing is that it's not just, yes, you can have a developer involved in, the initial stages of it, but really it's about monitoring how things are going through the system. So it's making sure that, every step of the way you're controlling every piece of it as it goes
Yeah.
forward. And to me, that just goes back to, how is that better than what current processes are? I mean, are you really going to be able to make your organization more agile while still ensuring that it's safe?
Yes. End of
So
episode.
let me add this. I know that some organizations are building their own internal versions of ChatGPT, right? They're using machine learning models that they're heavily controlling the data that's being fed and how protected that data is within their organization. So there for larger organizations, probably, this is not probably something that everybody is going to be able to build right now, but there is potentially a solution to building something like this that allows for that level of protection.
It's actually really freaking accessible,
Really?
which is
Okay, tell me
cool.
how.
I, all right, I'm gonna try to keep this on the tracks because I'm getting excited and I'll go off on a rabbit trail.
Do
But
it.
final ring of protection after you've scanned your pipeline, you should be doing scans in production. You should be doing penetration testing. You should be doing at least annual reviews of your security posture,
Yeah.
especially if you have regulated data within your sphere of control. So we've covered the gamut there. All the way in development, you have somebody that understands what they're doing, what they're deploying. You have protections of your supply chain that's being scanned as you go through the process. And then you're testing on the backside, you're cross-checking with actual pen tests. So these things are really accessible. The easiest way to get your feet into purpose-built machine learning, not machine learning, but purpose-built Gen AI is with what they call RAG or Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's
Okay.
basically where you take an existing model, whether it's one of the Chat GPT models, the OpenAI models, or if it's a Google
And
model,
you
whatever it is,
feed it your own data.
you sure do.
Clever.
I've actually done that on my local machine because I'm always curious with how much can you actually protect your data and get value?
Yeah.
Because there's no arguing the commercial models are just better than the open source ones, at least today. But I have a use case where I need to draft a secure SDLC policy and a procedure, and that needs to be based on input and requirements from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, New York Department of Financial Security, and a few other regulatory bodies.
Hmm.
Those documents are like 4,000 pages apiece. I'm not reading all of those. That's insane.
Why not? Come on.
I stood up a little demo environment on my local machines, plugged all of those documents into it, did the OCR on the document, which is optical character recognition. It's
Hmm.
computer seeing a letter and turning it into an actual letter. Ran the OCR on all of that, imported it, and then started being able to ask questions. So I
So was the model that you used open source and you just like put it in front of
you
the information? So you took like, unstructured data, turned it into a structured data set, put this model in front of it, and then ask the model questions. And the model knows to just look at your data set. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
So the pipeline that I had to build is you have to have something that can pull the information off of the page, which
Hmm.
PDF processing in 2025 is still not good. I don't know why. But so you have to have something that pulls the information off the page and then you have to store it somewhere, which is typically a vector database. And
Hmm.
that's how the model is able to understand how related things are because vector databases store things based on how related or how different they are. And so as you're asking it questions, it says like dog and cat are 5 apart because they're different, but they're not that different. Dog and dolphin are like 40 apart because those are real different. But at the end of the day, you've pulled something off the page, you've stored it in the database, and then you have the model that can introspect that data and answer questions based on what it knows to be true from those documents.
That's really cool. So when you're doing like building OCR technology. I assume how well you've done with, you know, ensuring that the data that's on the PDF is actually correctly translated into the database. I'm sure that plays a part in how effective your model is going to be, right?
It does. And that's a lot of data science is data cleaning and data validation and data
Yeah.
structuring. It's everybody wants it to be the fun modeling activity, but it's just not. It's getting the good
It's
data
data
on the front
hygiene.
end. Yeah, because if you have garbage data, the computer's not going to tell you anything you don't already know. A fantastic example. Fantastic example. We were trying to generate, or we were trying to qualify certain lead sources that we get,
Hmm.
and we were looking at various campaigns, and a lot of these campaigns that we wanted to qualify to see if we could raise the conversion rate had historically low conversion rates, as you would imagine. But so when we're training models, we look at, say, I've got 10,000 leads in this campaign and it converts 3% of the time.
Hmm.
I spit all of that data into a model to train it, and the computer says, oh, shoot, if I just say no, it's not going to convert, then I'm right 97% of the time.
Oh no,
So,
the computer's too smart.
it's all about statistics, and it's trying to reach the best answer it can, the fastest it can.
Statistically, it is right. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
completely enough of the time to, yeah,
So
that's
then
really funny. So what do you do?
that's
You're
not
like,
valuable.
don't say no.
Well, so you
You
oversample
can't
or
say that.
undersample. I
Yeah.
I have to thumb the scale, which is a lot of what you find yourself doing in training. I have to say, all right, look, take this 3% and duplicate them until I get to 50-50,
Mm.
so that is no longer a factor that the computer's looking at as it's training. It's not the existing conversion rate. I don't want that. I want to find good leads based on other data points, not
Yeah.
the obvious one
Yeah.
that they all
It's really
stink.
So I'm curious, a lot of what you're talking about, I mean, we're talking about like citizen developers and how successful can they be without a developer involved in it. And I think we all agree that you have to have trained humans involved in this to be successful long term. But I'm curious now, is developer going to be a little bit different nowadays than what it might have meant 10 years ago? Because a lot of what you're talking about is data engineering, is the data side of the house. So how siloed can a developer be from the data that they're working with?
Well, I used to take issue with this differential where, somebody wants to talk about a developer versus an engineer. And I've seen that used for evil, to be clear. Somebody just wants to say, my group's better than yours, so they're engineers and you're developers. But in reality, a junior developer is never going away. There has to be a junior for there to be a senior, because at some point, senior's going to want to retire, or they won't. As of right now, we
Not
all
in
have,
this economy.
but as of right now, we all have an expiration date, whatever that is. At some point, I'm not coming to work anymore. So you have to have some way of pipelining that skill set in, which we've talked about
Hmm.
before. But in this case, like, junior developers are not going away. Maybe in this economy, it turns into there's fewer jobs, which we've seen, but we still have to have a way to get developers in and trained. The way to go about that is at a very early period, very early on in your career, you have to constantly emphasize the value of product mindedness. My value as a developer isn't only to write code. I'm not here just because I understand syntax. I'm here because I'm able to convert needs into things, and I'm able to
Hmm.
do that well. And there's been a habit of companies and tech leaders saying, I'm just going to do tech. That's what I'm doing. I got the blinders on. The business strategy is somebody else's responsibility. And that's gone by the wayside. And if it hasn't at your company already, it needs to quickly. Your CIO can't be responsible for technology. Your CIO has to be responsible for outcomes.
Yeah.
Move the needle in the business with technology, and the rest will follow. So as you start introducing AI, you have that ringed approach of protections. So don't say no. We're not just going to avoid innovation, but we have to do this smart, and we have to do it well.
Yeah.
Deploying low code isn't a silver bullet. Nothing in technology is a silver bullet. If somebody says otherwise, they're lying to you or they're trying to sell you something.
They're
But
definitely trying to sell you
yeah.
something.
So
And they're lying to you.
imagine I turn on a low code platform. We're not even talking AI right now. We're just talking drag the
Yes.
boxes and widgets.
Typical low code. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to already expose a risk.
Mm-hmm.
You can engineer around it. You can architect around it. You have
Guardrails.
You have a whole service layer that's prepared for somebody to do something real stupid. It's fine. You can build around it. It's going to be expensive to build around it, but maybe your business is prepared for that, and maybe that's valuable to you because you have a staff of logically sound individuals that just don't know code, and there's no reason for them to know code. Fine. That's a fantastic use of time because then I can deploy my developers, probably fewer developers, to build that service layer that exposes my data, protects my data, and does it in a way that is consumable by the rest of the population. I can use AI to accelerate that. But because I've got those ringed protections, I've got developers that are looking at the code, I've got scans that are looking at the code, I have pen testers that are looking at the code, I can do that with a relative degree of safety.
That feels like just as much like surrounding process and ecosystem as having a traditional development team.
Maybe
What's
not.
the difference?
It's about what you govern and how you govern it. In 2020, everything was about data protection. You have your SQL servers, you have your relational databases, your document databases. That's the data that you protect. That's the core of your systems. The chances of a traditional developer writing an egregious security hole are much lower. I say egregious because they definitely exist. Like the security holes continue to happen, but
Yeah.
something just stupid like I pasted the database access token to my website, that's much lower, assuming you have sort of an industry standard pull request code review type model. But in the world of AI, I'm less concerned with the end result as I am the meta cycle. How does everything happen all at once, and what's the supply chain look like? I can govern that, but it's more hands off. It's more abstract.
Well, and who would own governance in this scenario? So you have like no code, you have a governance process, you have versioning, maybe even testing and auditing, compliance, when they're, non-technical users are building the operational tools. So who would own that governance? Would that be a technology division?
I think, and this may be a hot take, I'm not sure, but I think that in all cases with technology, there should be checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have someone writing the policy and the procedure that knows enough to know what's important. And you have somebody that's validating that policy and procedure is followed and actually fits the requirement. So in a lot of companies where I've thoroughly enjoyed working with my information security, cybersecurity partners, both of them are technical, but one has an additional
But their loyalty is to different things.
Right.
Their specialty.
They're an arm of compliance, but they have technology knowledge and they have that additional contract view. Make sure we're doing the right thing, make sure we're doing it legally and compliantly. But then you have the technology side that's interested in deploying the thing, building it and deploying it.
Which, by the way, my favorite security engineers fit into the model you're talking about. They don't say, no, you can't do that. They say, here's how you can do that safely. And I think that's exactly what we've been talking about, right? Is, use low code, use no code platforms, introduce these chat GPT style coding tools into your world, but here's how you do it safely. Here's how you create a environment where you're protecting yourself to the best of your ability, which is interesting. And I think it's the path forward that a lot of companies are going to need to pave. You can't get rid of your development team. You're not going to be able to do that. But what you can do is you can democratize things to the certain extent, as long as there's the checks and balances wrapped around it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. If you've done your ROI analysis and you really are missing out on a whole segment of revenue because you're not able to deploy changes or new applications quickly into production because your development staff is hard to scale.
Yeah.
There may be something there for it. And in that case, what I think it requires is a as an intentional reorganization and restructuring where you get the developers either into a mindset to become engineers, or you redeploy those developers into a more business-centric role where you're doing kind of this ripple effect. I've got one technologist that can live within a business unit and help get them up to speed on generated code or on low code and logic reviews. And then you take your engineers, and they're the ones that are responsible for building the platform that they interact with, that ultimately keeps us safe by protecting our data and protecting our services.
What you just said kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask, because when I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking, okay, we're going faster. We're building these additional features. You know, we have different groups that can build workflows or whatever for their different groups. But why? What is the overarching product? And coming from the product person, what's our product vision? What are we trying to accomplish? What's our grander architectural scale of what we're trying to align on here? We may not have that in the same way that we would previously, right?
Probably not.
But if we're building a platform for it, then you probably can still have a certain product vision, right? You're going, okay, this is a workflow platform. You can build workflows here. That's what this is. This is what the low code tool is here. You know, this one over here is maybe a sort of a tool that you can use to review contracts or whatever. You store your contracts here, and it's going to produce this for you here, and you can ask it questions and it can do whatever for you, build you a model on how you want to renew contracts. So you can build these products and protect them and protect this vision and still have people interacting with it and doing things that they want.
Yeah, we may need to pen this one because I have a whole nother set of thoughts on that. But the thing that this meaningfully does is it makes technology and technologists like myself the catalyst. We're not the primary reactants. We're not doing the thing. And I don't need to care about how the thing is done. What I need to care about is it done in a compliant way? Is it done in a way that protects our environment?
You're data. Building a framework with guardrails and protections and monitoring and this and that so that you're ensuring that you're safe.
Yeah, it's
go do what you want.
It's the idea that I've deployed a data warehouse and I've exposed it through semantic models as opposed to direct SQL access. I don't need to care that not compliance, but accounting wants to connect to those models through Excel. That hurts my sensibilities, and I think there's better ways to do it. But if they're comfortable with it and it's safe and it's reasonable, why do I need to care?
Yeah, go do.
It makes them faster. It makes me not have to deal with it. It scales better, and it meets them where they are.
And now we have a topic for next time too.
Yes, we should write that down. But I think this is where we need to land the plane. We said we would tell you how to set a strategy, and effectively what we've done is given you a lot of things to think about. Safety first and foremost. Don't worry, developers aren't going away. Junior developers aren't going away. But you as CIO, you as CEO, you as COO need to think about how you're deploying them and in what cases so that everybody scales well and we don't fall on our faces. In either case, I will remember to post the Forbes article that we reviewed today or we talked about today and a few others for your consideration. I'm always interested to hear what you have to say, what you think about the episode. A few of you reached out on the last one, which was a lot of fun. Definitely love hearing from you, gorgeous listeners. And you know what to do. If you've liked the episode, go ahead and share it, like, subscribe, bell icon on YouTube, all of the stuff. Whatever,
all the things.
Wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you happen to find us, go ahead, drop us a line, do all of the things. And thanks for listening. This has been Blaze Well with Others.